I've worked on oil rigs for years, but nothing could have prepared me for the terrifying experience I had at a remote rig off the coast of Alaska. It was supposed to be a routine job, but from the moment we set foot on that rig, something felt off. The rig, known as Rig 23, was miles away from the nearest land, accessible only by helicopter. When we arrived, the first thing that struck me was the isolation. The rig was in a constant state of disrepair, and the crew was a small, tight-knit group. The atmosphere was strangely quiet, even for an oil rig. There were some peculiar rules that I had never encountered before. Rule number 1. Never go near the storage area at night. The storage area on Rig 23 was a large, metal building situated far from the main living quarters. It was filled with supplies, spare parts, and some old machinery. The rule about not going near it at night was rigidly enforced. The foreman, a grizzled veteran named Rick, made it clear that anyone caught near the storage area after dark would face severe consequences. At first, I thought it was just a standard safety measure. But the strictness of the rule, combined with the foreman's ominous warnings, made me curious. I asked around, but no one seemed willing to discuss it. They would just glance nervously and change the subject. Rule number 2, always keep your radio on. Another peculiar rule was that we had to keep our radios on at all times, even while sleeping. The radios were old and crackled with static, but the idea was that if anything happened, we'd be able to communicate. The rule seemed reasonable until I started hearing strange, unidentifiable noises over the radio at night, faint whispers and indistinguishable murmurs that sent shivers down my spine. Rule number 3. Never enter the control room alone. The control room was the nerve center of the rig, filled with screens, dials, and monitoring equipment. The rule here was clear. No one was to enter the control room alone. If you needed to access it, you had to go with at least one other person. Again, this rule was enforced with a level of seriousness that bordered on paranoia. One night, after a grueling shift, I decided to investigate the storage area despite the rules. My curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, maybe find out what was so dangerous about it. The wind howled as I approached the storage area, the metal structure looming like a dark shadow against the night sky. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the dim light from my flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The air was stale and filled with the smell of oil and rust. As I moved deeper into the building, I noticed something strange. There were several old, locked crates piled in a corner. They looked like they hadn't been touched in years. I was about to examine one when I heard a sound, an unsettling thump coming from somewhere deeper within the building. I froze, my flashlight shaking. I was about to turn and leave when I saw something that made my blood run cold, a figure, or rather a shadowy shape, moving among the crates. It was too dark to make out any details, but the shape was unmistakably humanoid. I bolted out of the storage area, heart pounding, and went straight back to my quarters. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw. I didn't want to appear paranoid or make things worse. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers over the radio grew louder, more insistent. I could hear fragments of conversations that didn't make any sense. I kept my radio on, trying to drown out the eerie sounds with the static, but it was impossible to ignore. The next day, something even stranger happened. A crew member named Dave went missing. He was one of the most reliable guys on the rig, and no one had seen him since the previous evening. The search was frantic but turned up nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. A few days later, we were told that Dave had likely fallen overboard. It seemed improbable, but the case was closed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, one evening, I decided to break the rule about entering the control room alone. The curiosity was too strong. I entered, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The control room was in disarray, the monitors displaying static and error messages. But the most disturbing thing was a series of photos pinned to the wall, showing different crew members, including Dave, in various states of distress. Just then, the door to the control room slammed shut behind me. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. My flashlight flickered, and I heard the whispers again louder, clearer. It felt like they were coming from everywhere at once, surrounding me. Panic set in as the temperature in the room dropped, my breath forming visible clouds. I banged on the door, screaming for help. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally creaked open, and Rick stood there with a grim expression. He didn't say a word, but led me out of the control room and back to the main quarters. That night, the whispers over the radio stopped, but the sense of dread never left. A few days later, I was transferred off Rig 23, and I never found out what really happened to Dave or why the rules were so peculiar. The rig was eventually shut down and abandoned, but every time I hear a radio crackle or see a shadowy figure in the distance, I can't help but think about the horrors that lurk in the dark corners of that isolated place.